Methodology and the great struggle. To be conscious beyond the level of mental autopilot is like a man standing on a book filled with blank pages and no cover. Daddy, does that mean we're mostly on our own? Drop the mostly, boy, and forget the rest. The possibility of another consciousness is a terrible thing to waste on systematic methodology. But with most of the knights who ever ride off, the discipline of horsemanship is all they ever gain. Daddy, does that mean we shouldn't even try? No, boy, it's telling you not to get so attached to your mount that you're able to forget the grail along with everything else in life. One physician advised his patients, utmost care should be given to two areas, the mouth and the anus, the entry and the exit of all the body's nourishment. And one man pondered its application to the mind. To be sane, sound, and normal is to show up for work every morning. One man was bewildered, astonished, and aghast about conditions. Not about the conditions he was in, but about the conditions in him. No man counts himself conscious who has not a rambling mind on automatic set. The next speaker mounted the podium and opened with this comment. My topic tonight was to have been stupidity. Specifically, how not to be stupid. But I've decided I'm not going to run the obvious risk of being humiliated in this little escapade, so I'm canceling. And folded his papers and left. Remember, the face you saved wasn't worth the effort it took. Without the sound of gunfire in the distance, ordinary minds can bear no description of life. Query, how can you tell that a philosopher or a spiritual sage harbors personal criticism of life? Answer, he's alive and thinking. No. If they can speak semi-coherently, most men accept this as consciousness. Staring, a poem. One man could stare, oh how he could stare, down at the ground or up in the air. He could stare out and he could stare in. Awareness would stop and staring begin. Boy, he could stare, I mean really stare, while picking his teeth or pulling his hair. He would stare in and he would stare out. All there's to say, that's about. One man had a habit, and I mean a bad habit, if by bad habit we mean an incessant one. His bad habit was that he continued to just be himself. Snake handlers never get angry at the snakes that pass through their hands. Take a lesson. In the secondary mental world of man, you find all the metaphors for life, while in the primary physical one, you find the life that gives birth to all metaphors. Meteorology and the great struggle. Fog is to the mind as the flash of an atomic blast is to consciousness. Facts, sad but true. Even a mystic can live in London. Well, at least visit too often. No matter how deep may go the thoughts of the mind, refined consciousness can always go deeper. Daddy, when mystics go down in the mines, why don't they wear lights on their hats? No. Their minds are their lights. Talk without substance is what ordinary men call talk. A boy asked his father, is there anything positive to be derived from common forms of entertainment? Yes, a reminder of the limited evolution of human consciousness and sensitivity. As non-reasonable as may sound, 'tis only a true mythical warrior who will ride off in search of a cure for an ill that is unknown to him. This is what separates weekend warriors from the lieges of the king, the dreamers from the doers, and real men from the faux version. The difference. Mystics have more and better metaphors. To clarified consciousness, the audio output of the mind is like the soothing sounds of endless numbers of metal barrels filled with nuts and bolts falling forever from atop high places onto double hard concrete. I can just hear it now. Daddy, is that why at the beach you see mystics only holding their own heads up to their ear? Look, boy, a stingray. A life of no continual mental effort is a life normally spent. How you can tell that you're part of the others is that you feel, without others, I am nothing. Proverb expansion. Lay down with dogs, get up with dogs. So what'd you expect? And now another reading from our book, How to Be a Successful Mystic. Quoting now. One of the first rules to becoming a famous and successful mystic is that you must be personally likable and full of sympathy. I don't know, maybe I picked up the wrong book. One man's brain activity was liable to change. But if by liable you're thinking capable of conscious modification, you're wrong. I mean, his brain activity was liable to do almost anything. Listen, I can hear it now. The song of ordinary man. Oh, I'm at my best when I'm at my worst. The trouble with the mystically inclined. The trouble with the mystically inclined is that while everyone else is dissatisfied with their external circumstances, the mystically inclined, well, the mystically inclined dagnabbit are about their inner ones. Daddy, is that why people always find neural adventurers to be more trouble than they seem worth? Yep, boy, just the way it's supposed to be. It is only those more conscious who ever silently yell to themselves, who the hell are we working for anyway? In an ordinary man, the mind begs to be left alone, while in a mystic, it demands not to be. And now some good news about it's never too late. Even if you've lived a life struggling to be more conscious, just before you die you'll whine and cry, you can still revert back to normal just in time. Daddy, is that good to know? Son, that's damn near enough to gag a whale. Okay, when it comes right down to it, a mystic don't work for nobody. Shocking, huh? Disappointing, huh? Unbelievable, right? That's why this generally don't ever get mentioned much in public. One man told his son, if you find the mind interesting, just wait till you dip into enhanced consciousness. If you're just going to ride the trains in and around the suburbs of Paris, it's best to stick with just one key word or system. In an ordinary man, the mind begs for food, but only food it recognizes. A mystic would rather starve to death. Those on the trail of shit, no smelling assistance need. Question, how can you spot a real mythical neural knight? Answer, he's the one. When? Who, when he charges off, neither you nor he knows exactly which way he's headed. A mystic must be able, from a dead stop, to mentally jump, flat-footed, 50 feet forward in any direction. Daddy, Why, among the ordinary, do mystics have such a bad reputation? Because they deserve it. All of history is filled with ideas that men live in a dream, that men do not perceive what's going on, that in some way they are at least one step away from a direct confrontation with life itself. I could start digging up all number of well-known stories, plays, novels, parables from religion that I say you generically, that men ordinarily would not analyze in that way, but have to do with the same exact thing. And there are very specific instances amongst philosophers, would be publicly accessible mystics of the past, and even now I'm sure science fiction writers, that do insist that ordinary men are living in some sort of shadow world, in some sort of dream world, in some sort of distorted reflection of what's really going on. These stories, even that directly, continue to be remembered and so well known as should cause you to consider the fact that even ordinary minds, that is the general common public, vibrates in their little nervous system some way in a sympathetic manner to this idea. That is to say, they somewhere find favor with it. It is not dismissed absolutely out of hand. The stories continue. It's discussed philosophically at an academic level. And it is not difficult at all to get people that are fairly sophisticated that show any interest in affairs of a strange nature, UFOs, or, of course nowadays I don't guess I even have to clarify it. You grab almost any Tom, Dick, or Fred off the street, and they're going to admit to having some interest in some crackpot in some unusual area. If they have their own personal psyche, or that they believe in the spirit world, or you can talk to the dead, or that we're going to discover Atlantis, or that there's a conspiracy of other humans trying to control the planet consciously, willfully. It's just not hard. And then to get such people, I didn't mean that as an absolute slam, I still am referring to fairly ordinary people in most respects, that you can get them to show some interest, some agreeable interest in the idea. That if you say, I read this big novel, I read this book translated from the Tibetan from the 1400s that says, just point blank, it says that the state that we live in, the normal state that we run governments and have children, raise families, build cities, that all of this is almost a dream, that it's some sort of reflection that we're not seeing what's really going on, and even though this life seems quite real enough and in some respects satisfactory enough, that in some way we're not perceiving precisely exactly what's going on. And it is not hard at all to get people to nod a little bit to that. And I guess the sort of people listening to me right now are so used to it that you figure that's a preface. But stop for a second, and consider you're so used to it, but that is strange. If you just talk about your mother and father perhaps, or people that you know at work, or your uncles and aunts, just people that are fairly sane, that if you set them down and tried to tell them that you heard an idea that we live not in the life that we think we do, that although it seems real enough and we can eat and sleep and procreate and live and die, but the actual perception of it is not the perception of what's going on, that's in some way removed. It's a bad reflection, it's a distortion. Remember, you're pretty used to it. But in one respect, they should go, oh, come on, you're nuts. What's realer than this? You know, me and you, and what's there not to be real? And yet, you can get people to give some passing consideration to it. It's not difficult at all to get people to sort of nod. And it wasn't the point for the night, but you could also ask yourself, why is that? They will not do anything further with it. They will not pursue it. They will not reach up and rip you by the lapels and say, tell me more, tell me more. But you can get just almost any ordinary, sophisticated, sane person. They'll give a little lip bite and go, well, yeah. Even though it wasn't the point. And I said, you were to find that interesting. Why is it? It's because everybody knows that life is some kind of fixed game. They know it's a crooked roulette wheel. They know that the cards are stacked, which is just one step away from God and or conspiracies, whichever one you find cheaper to pursue. At any rate, it strikes almost any reasonable, ordinary person on this planet, presented to them the right way. It will strike them at the moment as feasible, at the very least, that they will nod. Well, to tell them that you heard somewhere, that there's this theory, there's this book that says that the life we lead is not the real life that's going on, that we are in some way removed from it. I could drag out a lot of religious parables, but we've done enough of those, but all the major religions, the basic parables, the stories of the founders' lives can be seen as the same kind of statement, that you can see the life of the founder as being in some way stepping aside from this shadow life, from this non-genuine existence. Although it's always called something else, but you could see the enlightenment of Buddha, you could see the Holy Spirit, the Christ consciousness taking over the man Jesus, and you could see Abraham realizing that physical gods could not be the actual source of reality, and all the others. But you can see that as another way that those founders, what they were representing, their life and their satori, their epiphany, was them waking up, or in some way seeing through a shadow existence, a less than absolutely valid presentation of what life is. So, what I was going to present to you tonight, since for the more than 1,000 tapes we've made now, I keep beating around the bush, and people should write and accuse me of not ever actually saying what I intend to say, and since I'll do it for them, you never get around to saying what could just be said directly, do you? So I'm showing enough disdain not to reply to that. But I could be a bit more specific. I was trying to tonight. This is based upon all of these stories, fairy tales, parables, the whole idea that strikes people as having some sort of validity, even though they do not have the wherewithal or the interest to pursue it, that they will go, hearing the idea. Now first, let's dismiss the life of the body. The life of the body with a sane person is as valid as it can be. It is as real and authentic and solid as it can be. It is only through the trickery of verbalization that we can split the mind from the body and talk about it. But if you were a wild boy of Borneo, if you had grown up living with wolves or elephants or insurance salesmen or some other wild creature, some animal, if you had grown up without the influence of the other intellects, your body could function in an adequate manner, that you would probably live at least as long as the wolves or elephants that raised you. The body's life, if you separate just for a moment, just theoretically, if you separate the mind's connection to it, your body, if you're an ordinary sane person, lives a quite real life. It has no question as to what it's doing. It has no question as to the reality of food, sex, sleep. It has no question as to the reality of the world in which it lives. It just does. It has nothing to say. You get above that and we're into the world of man. And what I was going to suggest, a way to consider it along the lines of something else we've been talking about in general, is the whole idea of there being a shadow world, a kind of daydream world, I can explain fairly simply. That is the world of the mind, and what gives the mind the ability to even come up with the idea and for other minds to agree to it is the unexecuted possibility of being conscious beyond the mind, or else you couldn't come up with it. The mind would not commit suicide. The mind cannot look at the bottom of its own feet. And so the mind alone could not come up with the idea that what we perceive mentally to be life is not a true representation. We're missing something. We're one step away. We're in a land of reflection. We're in a land in some way removed, that we have some sort of stage of sleep, it's been called, that we're maybe walking around, but we're not fully conscious. Now, if there was not a possibility of being conscious beyond the level at which the mind is now, the mind could never come up with the idea. That is always an acid test, and no one ever seems to want to drink it. But, of course, if you could, it'd do more than poison you. It could wake up little neurons that are now going. In fact, some of them appear to be Frankenstein's monster. That they may have been alive once, God knows when, but now they seem grossly inert. And yet, remember, Dr. Frankenstein wouldn't give up. I don't know how we got Dr. Frankenstein into stories of mythical knights and tales of Buddha, but there you go. What strikes man, where this comes from in life, where this comes from, it's an echo of the future. Looked at on the ordinary linear line of time moving, the way the mind thinks about this is actually an echo of the future. It's a preview of coming events. And the mind translates it in such a way into myths, philosophical ideas, psychological theories, religious parables, that perhaps what we're seeing is not actually what's going on. It works best not to say that what you're seeing is just an absolute dream or that it's absolutely incorrect, but to say that in some way it's not precise, it's not perfected, that it is almost as though you're looking in a fog. Of course, another acid test I can throw in and just drop the whole conversation and stop the tape. And that is, I can quit talking about all this, and there's a way in which you can practice a kind of extreme meteorology within your own head right now, and you realize, well, goddamn, I knew that. You can live in London, or you, if you don't live there, you can visit there far too often. But back to something that we might could talk about. What I was going to suggest to you, that what all of this represents, the idea that man does not see, that man does not live life directly as it's going on. Remember, we're not discussing the body. This has no application to the body. If it were not for the mind, this kind of conversation, the idea would never have arisen. The body has no such theories, no such question. It is only above, it's up in the neural areas that man has the concept that perhaps what I'm seeing as being life, my life, the life of everyone else, existence itself, reality itself, is not a true reflection. I am not truly seeing it. And if a man never thinks it again, I repeat, he can hear it under fairly innocuous circumstances and go, because it almost explains things, which the whole idea of gods and conspiracies and evil forces attempt to do the same, but that, in one swell foop, almost does it. But an ordinary man has no backup material. There is no collective support for such an idea. There is no religion. There is no group meeting somewhere that he can go and that will say, well, if you can hear some of that, you're better off pursuing that idea. It is much more fruitful than trying to pursue an extra systemic God or trying to consider what unconscious drives and traumas run you. if you see it, on the other hand, if you try to pursue the course that's simply how you perceive life, how you perceive you, is not a true representation of what's going on. But men do not even have the wherewithal to pursue that any further, even though they will go, And just for a moment, without them being able to verbally analyze it, but just for a moment, it almost strikes them as, well, this is the answer. This is what I never got from church. This is what I never got from reading occult books and pursuing all sorts of weird philosophies. But then they'll turn right around and fall into my man's poem, staring. A poem. Boy, how he could stare. In and out. Because if you tried to pursue, if you could successfully pursue that idea yourself any further, that what we see is not the true representation of what's out there. And what we see in us, what we perceive to be in us, is not a true representation of what's in us. If you could pursue just that, it would have this one dastardly, immediate result. It would interfere with staring to such a degree that most people will not tolerate it. It keeps you tap dancing. It keeps you unsettled. And God forbid, it might even give you a chance to shake up what appears to be reality enough that you begin to see through the cracks. To where things kind of shift and move, you can see things going on. There are even strange stories about that, by the way. What I was going to suggest to you in general would be this. The stories and the idea that man does not live truly in touch with what's going on, that he is in some way in a fog, in a daze, in a semi-state of sleep, that he is one step removed from reality, that is the ordinary mind's perception of what's going on. The alternative is, beyond that, that is where the notion comes from. That is where you do not stare at life. That is where there is no inner dialogue, there's nothing to say about life. Because anything you say about life is part of the mind's imprecise reflection that gives rise to the dreams that we're not living as we could. It didn't do much last time, but I'll try it again. All of this is a metaphor, which is a nice synonym for bullshit. But you're left with this. If you're trying to take this great mythical journey from Paris to Istanbul, if you're trying to go from the mind's conception of what reality is to a consciousness of it, then what in the hell are you going to do from Paris to Istanbul? And what are you going to do if you never actually get there? And if you're determined to get there, which only you can determine whether you're determined to get there, whether you're going to pursue it. That ends up being all these kinds of discussions, and it turns metaphor into metaphor into metaphor when it's all right in front of your eyes. But let me take the notion that we do not live, or that we do not perceive reality as it is. Since, as I was recently accused, as some of you know, of never actually saying what it sounds like I'm about to say, and I never actually say it. Of course, I vehemently deny the charge. But to allay part of such ill-founded suspicions, I will say outright that, as many of you already know, you've had enough glances, you can, for reasons that we won't go into, that you can suddenly turn around with no drugs, no stimuli, apparently nothing extraordinary has happened other than your years and years of farting around with this. And you suddenly turn around, and it's as though, although life appears to be in 3 dimensions and in color, it's as though you realize that you've been looking at, compared to what you see right now, it's like a real faded, maybe a 1929 or 30, one of the first color cartoons It's been laying in a vault. You can see a few little colors, but it's washed out, and you suddenly turn around, and yeah, it looked to be in 3D life, and yet you look around, and God, this begins to sound like advertising and promotion. Is why I don't do it. But here we go. I've gone this far. You look around, and it's as though just ordinary circumstance. You don't see flying saucers, and you don't see Buddha walking on the water and arm wrestling with Jesus. You just turn around, and it's just ordinary mundane things. You just might be looking out the street or up the sky. And it's almost a whole new street, a whole new sky. Nothing weird. The cars do not turn into some sort of watercolor in the rain. They don't start running together, and they don't start, all their little molecules begin to whistle at you like they used to in the 60s when you were out in Arizona taking those weird fungi. It's just you look around at everyday affairs and you realize that something, because I'm talking about another stage of consciousness. And it doesn't have to be, forget whether it's enlightenment, but you simply look, and it can just be for a moment, but when it happens to someone who is interested in it, it is so startling, you cannot ignore it, you cannot forget it. And you look, and it's just everyday affairs. Except you realize that everyday affairs, the most everyday affairs, you don't really get a good grasp of. That is, as a rule, for a handful of times, let us say, number of times, people go through that before they ever get that same sort of look inside their own head. That gets to be, you could say, if you wanted to, a crucial point. I wouldn't say that, but if you wanted to, you could. At least you know that you're well out of Paris, that you're off the commuter trains. In a sense, you're no longer running around and around in the suburbs and darting back into town and just taking day trips. And always checking back to make sure that the Eiffel Tower is still in sight so that you know you can get home and be you. That they have not pulled up the drawbridge permanently. But once you get a dose, once you get the first view of the same sort of thing, that is, of looking around just at life, you just turn a corner, walking down the street, whatever, you look up out the window. Everything, all your senses. God, I sound like a huckster. The colors, the brightness, etc., and of course there's one other small detail. It gets very quiet. It gets very quiet and in a sense almost very still, but not the kind of still like this. It's not the still of staring. It's like the unwarranted, the inauthentic jerkiness of life. You realize, I have never, you don't realize anything at the time, unless you're dumb enough to tell yourself what you realize, and then miracle upon miracle, it be gone. But that is enough that keeps many people going, and that, of course, is one of the great selling aspects of the hallucinogenic drugs. I don't know whether any of you have ever considered the most popular drug throughout history has been alcohol, a depressant, not a stimulus to the brain. Has anyone ever thought why? Because I periodically point out that like what you are now called the hallucinogenic drugs, even the mild ones, that pot under the right circumstance, can give people a little feeling as they turn around and suddenly they go, wow, I never looked at my dog before. Well, some of it doesn't get any further, like you begin to think that each individual hair has a name and is barking or something. But just the fact that you just look around or to other people and realize, well, one of your friends or your wife or your boyfriend, you go, wow. And it's like, I've never seen them before. That would sound as though, for people interested in additional neural excitement and a new view of life, you would think, well, the hallucinogenic drugs would have overtaken alcohol a millennia ago. at any rate, if no one ever thought about it, alcohol, why is it, hands down, not even a contest, always has been, still is, the world's most popular foreign substance to put into the brain? When it does not excite at all, it depresses. All right, I'll answer it for you. Because it helps you to stare. Both internally and externally. It helps you become an even bigger I'm cleaning it up. It takes the normal state of sort of dazed consciousness that jerks around, but within which many people have some idée fixe. That you can, there are certain things that seem to excite you, like you can get mad at your girlfriend, or you can get mad about the government. And that seems to be one of your small excitements in life. Or you can get sort of aggressive. You can be in your car and somebody drives too close and you can turn around to your wife and say, boy, if that guy got in closer, I'd have stopped his car. Or if I could catch him, I'd whip his ass. And of course, you've got no intention of catching him. But all of those sorts of things, those kind of minor hobbies, put some alcohol in a man, and it's like it can refocus his unholy focused attention already. It can take his little pea brain awareness or his little pinpoint awareness and narrow it down even further. Does that tell you anything about the ordinary nature of human consciousness? Did I blow the preface? Right quick, if you start talking about drugs and just ordinary people and about that they all affect the mind, that's the whole point. That they finally end up in the brain, whether it be pot, cocaine, LSD, peyote, or alcohol. They go, well, yeah, okay, I knew that. And you go, well, the whole thing about putting it in your system, it's not to make you clumsy like alcohol. The person says, well, yeah, I know that. That's not the purpose. You don't want to do that to fall down and hurt yourself. And you don't get on pot to get to the point that you're going to drive your car on the freeway at 12 miles an hour and think you're speeding, and get a ticket. And they go, I know that. So you can say, well, the point is, all drugs, when people take drugs, they do it. I mean, it's to go to the brain. It's not to mess up their mind, their body. And they go, well, I know that. And so you say, well, so the thing is, we're talking about recreational. We're not talking about people that claim that they get drunk or take drugs because they're depressed. I'm talking about people that do it for fun. They say, yeah, I enjoy it. So you would, to this person, you say, well, if they all are working, if they take it for enjoyment to have an effect on the mind, the guy goes, yeah, 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 or you go, yeah, yeah, yeah. You go, and then all of them that I mentioned, except one, all of them excite the mind. I mean, you do it for fun. It's the weekend or it's after work. You go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I say, but how about the one that is the most popular, without any comparison, no contest, is alcohol, which depresses the brain, which depresses awareness. Why is that? Don't you find it unusual? No, man wouldn't have any answer for that. Of course, I already gave you the answer. But you understand that kind of, even this is unnoticed, but that kind of dichotomous, that one thing sounds as though it would be real if there was any recreational use. That we're not attacking or defending, but that people take drugs recreationally, that you would think, the whole term recreation, that is to have fun with your brain. Yeah. And of course, one or two drinks or the first drink, many times people do, under the right condition, go, I feel better, and you smile and you turn around, oh, hi to everybody. But like one or two more drinks, and what it does is take what little awareness, what little consciousness, what little brain activity you have that could be called thinking or awareness, and it makes it even smaller, but to the point that you will do things that you would never do, but based upon the fact that you can now say, well, I just suddenly realized, I knew I was tired of my wife or my husband, but goddamn, I've had enough. This is absolutely enough. And getting a pushing, or shouting match, or turn around to your boss. That's an old story. Christmas party, finally have too much to drink. And just suddenly, out of the clear blue sky, it seems, you turn around to your boss after about the fourth drink. 20 years, you got a pension coming. But off and on, all the time, everybody's bad-mouthing him. And you even make comments at home like that old fat son of a bitch, someday I'm going to tell him off. You're not about to tell him off. Not even within your limited range of consciousness, but here it is that you have been able to focus, that is narrow, diminish, whittle down what little consciousness you have through the benefit of alcohol to such a point that there you stand toe to toe your boss on Christmas within 10 or 15 years of retirement and go, you fat son of a bitch. I ought to whip your ass. There is why alcohol is more popular. I'm going to press on, but now you know I'm going to leave it to you people to figure out how the hell can that be? It just is. Where'd I stop? The shock after the first ones are quite pleasurable. And what I started to say was people have had, I hate to keep dragging them together, but there'd be people that might be seeing this on television that's never even heard of this, that had experiences just simply on drugs, the hallucinogenic drugs, that did feel that they could identify with the idea of looking around just an ordinary circumstance, your everyday environment, and not believing that you're seeing gods or talking to the dead or spirits or people from other planets, just everyday affairs that they suddenly looked around after they got sufficiently and properly high in a certain way, had certain drugs get into the brain juice system, and was absolutely struck without any doubt. I'm looking here at my room, my friends, my stereo, my window, my dog, my cat, my plants, and I don't see them this way ordinarily. And they also realize, I'm putting words on that which is nonverbal at the time, they realize that what they're seeing is not a druggy reflection. If it's just right, which is not all that unusual to happen, they have no doubt. It's not that, oh, wait a minute, I'm so drugged that things are looking weird. Because they don't look weird. You simply look around, it's everyday affairs, and your plants are not swaying in the breeze, and your cat is not suddenly talking to you or singing the opening chorus from Aida. Everything is just as it ordinarily is, except you look at it, and it's like you have never seen. Well, even that's the kind of description that druggies normally use. It's like I'd never seen my room before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I shouldn't repeat that. It's you've seen it because it's your room. The thing is, you understand, I keep whittling this down, and it's going to start to sound, if I had enough time and I didn't bore you, I was going to drag it on and on about how you would describe it if you would. You finally get down to the point that what you're seeing, the description is, it's almost no difference between what you're seeing in this altered state, even on drugs, or I'm using an example right now of drugs, that it's not that different, except it's completely different. But it's no different, it's no distinction that you could ordinarily enumerate. There's no way that you could afterwards or right then say, well, my cat was talking to me. That kind of, it's not that. It's just you see your cat, your dog, your room, your friends, just like it is, but it's like something happened. It's like you step back, it's like the whole thing just brightened up. It's just all kinds of things I could describe, and none of them necessarily are the final word. That can be used as an agreeable explanation as to why people stay on drugs or keep playing with them recreationally, is just that one thing, whether it's true or not, but it has a very potent effect on people. To be able to do that, the would-be mystics, those attempting to ride off on this great adventure, it begins to happen, no drugs, it just happens that in your own brain, something happens completely as non-weird as what I was trying to describe of even the weirdness of this happening on drugs. That you turn around one day just at your room, nothing strange happens. It almost cannot be described as anything different, but it's that same aspect, that same kind of thing that has no real description, is you just realize you're seeing it in a different way. And even that didn't work, because if we were actually being serious debaters, then you could say, well, now a different way, there's got to be a distinction, so what is it? Please explain. Mm-hmm. There's not real one. Mm-hmm. Which is the basis I'm getting to of why this idea flies that what we see, what we experience in life, our perception, is not the true one. Because that works best, as I pointed out to you in the beginning, if you don't say, well, what you see is an absolute dream, we're just living in an absolute dream. This is not life. If you just say we're living in something that resembles almost a dream, that it's like some sort of gauzy curtain, it's some sort of fog, that our eyesight, we're suffering some sort of internal myopia that has to do with our perception. That works better. That it's not that everything that you look at in the ordinary mind's perception of reality is absolutely wrong, is incorrect. It's just what now I'm trying to refine for you a bit verbally. It's that looking up and extremely pleasing, extremely quiet. First few times, well, every time it's sort of surprising, but the first few times it is shocking. And then it's not shocking in the fact that there's nothing shocking going on. It's like the second shock. I'm almost in an altered state of, God, am I about to be enlightened? Is this it? And yet you look around and Buddha's not appearing. Nothing weird's going on. You're there in your room or in your car, in your backyard, and yet you're in a whole new backyard. That is almost enough extraordinary stimuli to keep most would-be mystics addicted to this for the rest of their life. And as I said, it takes many ordinary people that play with drugs to keep them addicted, or that's their explanation to it, wanting to retrieve that, wanting to have it again and for it to expand. But the real shocker, Rue, that I was saying that you were almost irreversibly out of Paris on your way to somewhere, is for that same thing to happen in your mind, of you looking at your mind. And think about that. What can I describe? There are no chairs in your mind. There's no dog and cat. There's no friends in there. But the comparison strictly tracks. And it seems so shocking that there it is, the one thing you have lived with closer than anything, including your dandruff and bad gums, is your own mind. And suddenly, so I'm trying to exaggerate for dramatic sarcasm, you suddenly look at your mind, what's going on? And the kind of shock of looking around at your room and realize, well, I've never seen my room. I've never seen my dog before. I've never seen my wife or boyfriend. That is just, everybody knows, we'll assume, how shocking, how astounding. But think about it, to see it in your own mind. Or I should say the workings of your mind, what's going on. How in the hell did you explain that? This thing has been living in me. It's been with me 24 hours a day, lo, these many decades. And if somebody would have asked me 5 minutes ago, if they'd brought up a conversation about the need to study oneself and one's passions, and just the need to know oneself by God. The Greeks had it right. You just got to know yourself. And I would have said, yes, I have devoted a large part of my life. I mean, I'm not bragging. I can't show any I can't show any prizes I've received from doing it. But it's been interesting, and it's an ongoing process. You just keep peeling away and you keep hacking at it. But I have spent much of my life, much of my attention has been devoted for me trying to know myself. And people say that quite sincerely. People can say that quite sincerely, and suddenly at the age of 40 or 50, realize that they had no idea what was going on. I don't mean out there, and I don't mean in the universal sense of enlightenment, of knowing the secret of life. Let's put that off for a minute. Because for one thing, you should be, there's no word for this, but sort of chagrined, embarrassed, shockingly and pleasantly embarrassed, how about that? To realize the 40 years I've spent studying myself just went, bye-bye. And they're not even going right. They're gone. I spent 40 years, I'm not going to say it's wasted. I mean, you would have had to have been doing something. But of studying myself And you could have applied all sorts of disciplines, pursued all sorts of activities and systematic self-discovery methods or courses that you could have enjoyed. I don't deny that whatsoever. And you could have said, well, I spent 2 fine years in a retreat in a Buddhist monastery. I spent over $2,000 studying Dr. So-and-so's course on self-discovery. I even tried a year's worth of just regular talking psychiatric analysis. And you could say each and every one of them played a part. It helped me along, it helped me along. And just like that, it's all gone. Does that give you any idea of the difference? That everything you studied, I mean, everything was worthwhile. And I will not exclude listening to me, as entertaining as I can be sometimes. It's all gone. That doesn't make much sense to say it's all gone. It's just, can I go back and compare it to the one that most of you have had more familiarity with? That feeling of just walking around a corner there in your hometown or coming up to your own house or just look up from your desk in your room. You know, this experience, also surely you people read enough, this experience is known very well. It's throughout all sorts of fiction, dramas, everything. People who have never shown any interest or didn't display any interest in things metaphysical or transcendental, the experience is not that uncommon. It shows up in books on psychology. They don't know what to make of it. And most people, it's just momentary because they got nothing to do with it. They don't know where to go with it. It's meaningless. It's only a few people that you have got to bend, in that sense, flying around, lifting up the weights, cutting the material, chopping the corn, flying it back under, that is, killing 40 years, trying to do something. It's only after that that these moments come and you go, oh my God, and they mean something. But the moments, it is not like some sort of strange gift from the gods or some force that's traveling here by accident from other planets. It happens to people all the time. It happens to children a lot. I don't know why I throw this in, and it's useless because they're not quite conscious enough to be dumb enough for it to be any benefit. In other words, in one level, which is, I can also point out, it's the old idea in all religions that, you know, if you'd be more godlike or more conscious, be more childlike. And that strikes people as, oh, that sounds great, because if I was a child, we'd all be innocent and sweet and peace-loving. What are they, blind? They never looked at kids? They never saw children. They can't really make any sense out of it, but it does strike them. It does vibrate their little nervous system. And there's a reason for it. Because at a lower level, it's like in childhood, before you're really conscious, it's like you were well before you got sick enough to where wellness meant anything. I can't stop and explain every metaphor. It doesn't do you any good. But it's like you had to spend 40 years doing something. But it's all wasted. It is all irrelevant. And then you realize that all the descriptions you ever heard that we live in some sort of, that we're living like in a Iron Maiden, or we're living in a casket, or we're locked in a closet and always got, there's one little peephole that's so small that all you can see is right what's in front of you. You have very little, and you don't know it. You were born there, everybody's there, and we're all like in our own little casket or our own little box, and we talk to each other and we think that we're seeing each other, and you can't really get a good sight, or that we're living in a dream, or that we have a film over our eyes, or that we have been cast in a spell. You suddenly understand that all those descriptions, by God, they weren't bad. But to see it out there is one thing. To see it in your own mind, that everything your mind has done to you, well, if we're running out of time, I can be more gross. The realization when you look externally, the way it always starts, for times you look out at your room and you look out at the external world and realize that you don't see it in the way that you're seeing it right now, and the way you're seeing it right now, I'll just say it's superior. You find it preferable. There is no doubt. This is the way I should be seeing life. And it's gone. As pleasing, as pleasurable as that is, it is something else to see it in your own mind, because then you realize, at first it's almost a cold chill, that I have stumbled around 40 years, and for them to say, the descriptions I used to adopt as I believe myself that, well, yes, I believe that we're living in almost in a dream, in some sort of lower state of consciousness. I believe that. I made lectures. I wrote a book on that one time, you would say. And you realize, Jesus, Holy Mother, it is a miracle I got here, except you look around and you go, it's no miracle. Everybody's in the same condition. We're all living in Trinidad. We're all nothing but, in a sense, we're a bunch of zombies without the good steel band music, if you call it, if you call that music. This is the zombies jamboree. And it doesn't matter one iota that the president's a zombie, your boss is a zombie, your wife is a zombie, your children are zombies. It's zombies designing the highway system, zombies designing the traffic light patterns so that traffic will move faster or slower. It's zombies printing the money, zombies raising the interest rate, zombies building houses, zombies giving you a mortgage, then you're trying to refinance it with other zombies. The whole thing is zombies, and it doesn't matter. And you think, oh my God, and the biggest zombie is here, is you've been looking out there and analyzing and talking about life, and there was nothing to talk about other than, hey, it's a zombie jamboree. It is the difference in seeing life through your mind and non-committal consciousness.